Hi everybody, it's meteorologist Joe Cioffi. It is Monday, Memorial Day, 1 minute after 6 o'clock Eastern Time. I hope everyone had a safe and enjoyable holiday weekend as we have a lot of weather going on tonight. So I think we're going to come front and center and get right to it. Subtropical Storm Alberto is the first order of business here. And as Anthony Orr pointed out, this is the strongest, second strongest storm ever observed in the Atlantic Basin. Now, we have to be careful with this because we are talking since 1951. This would be the second strongest. But going back, it's hard to really quantify what might have happened going back to the 1800s, at a time when maybe they didn't have the exact lowest pressure measured in a tropical system, and any one of a number of other factors. But at least from what's down on paper, it is the second strongest ever observed in the month of May, and we at landfall actually saw this weekend a bit. What I have up at the moment is the surface map of coastal northwest Florida, and when you look at the direction of the winds, you've got near Panama City, the winds are either southeast or east-southeast. I'm not sure what station this is. I'm going to try and at least take a look at what some of these reporting stations are, but Tyndall Air Force Base is at 77 degrees, south-southwest at 24, peak gust to 33 miles an hour. It's like we're in the middle of updating something here. They're updating the radar echoes. Panama City Beach, which is the station, I just have it overhead. You should be able to see when that graphic comes up. But Panama City Beach, as of just before 6 o'clock, was south-southeast at 28, gusting to 41. You see where the radar echoes are. This is not exactly one of the most well-defined systems. When it was strengthening yesterday evening, it kind of peaked out overnight and actually just sort of held its own or weakened a little bit during the day today. It had this opportunity to gain some strength, and it didn't happen. Now, if we go to the west, Valparaiso, or Valparaiso, if that's the correct pronunciation, there the wind is northwest at 20, gusting to 28. And a little bit further to the north, we're looking at Duke Field, Elgin Air Force Base, northwest at 21, gusting to 32 with a peak wind of 35. So we do have some gales going on here, but we don't have any kind of crazy wind gusts, at least not in the last hour. The center is now pretty much inland and moving northward, and I'll get a little wider. The isobars would imply that maybe, the center is either right on the coast or just getting ready to move inland. But here's the profile of this a bit wider. I'm going to try to take off some of those obs here so it makes it a little bit clearer. And there you can see where the isobar is, the 1,000 millibar isobar. You can tell by the structure on the radar where how it arcs in. Also, it still has this subtropical nature to it, because when I pull away and show you some of the radar echoes up to the north as they begin to fill in, this system's circulation is rather sprawling. It almost looks more like a winter type storm, a cold core system, as opposed to a tropical system. If you were look at it at the surface map, it really doesn't have that. Never really was able to get that really tight, concentrated core. But we're seeing a lot of showers up into south, and particularly into North Carolina and into eastern North Carolina and southern Virginia at the moment. So its moisture field remains very extensive, and as a result, we do have numerous flood watches that are posted for a rather large area in the southeast, and I'll get to that in a second. I want to bring up the Southeast Regional Radar here, because you can really see the circulation pretty well. That spiral that's coming inland. A little core of heavier rains and thunderstorms on the Florida Panhandle. You can see it there. It's like kind of like a hook. You've got some bands that are off the Florida coast, but in reality, with this tropical storm, it is kind of a glorified rainstorm to a large extent, because thankfully it never really was able to get going. And by the way, it had a lot of things that were against it, in spite of the fact that it had a low wind shear environment, and in spite of the fact that the water temperatures were certainly supportive enough to bring this up to at least strong tropical storm strength, maybe borderline minimal hurricane strength. The fact that it was subtropical in nature to begin with, it just really, this time of year, it's tough. And it takes a long time for these systems maybe to make that full transition. If this were late June, July, or certainly again into August and into September, it would have probably been a no-brainer. But we're at the end of May. We're dealing with climatology, which only has really a handful of storms over a 160 some odd year period, where you're talking about maybe one storm every 10 years and only 4 of them becoming hurricanes. So there was a lot really going against it. Now, the rain on the northern fringe of here up into Tennessee, eastern North Carolina, southern Virginia, that has prompted flood watches to go up, and we'll bring up the National Weather Service's watches and warnings now that we're seeing at the moment. And here we go, and you can see large area of Alabama through much of Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Western Virginia, a good chunk of Tennessee, and even into Kentucky. We're looking at flood watches in the green, the red, the tropical storm warnings that continue this evening as of 6 o'clock Eastern time, but those warnings are going to gradually come down as Alberto moves further and further inland. We also have some special marine warnings in the yellowish brown that's off the Florida west coast and the Florida east coast, and that goes back to some of those bands we saw on the radar. I also want to bring up another area of concern tonight. Out in the Central Plains and Central Rockies, we have a rather large area that is under either a severe thunderstorm watch or a tornado watch, covering much of the eastern half of Colorado, southeastern Wyoming. We see that yellow area is the tornado watch in a portion of eastern Colorado, northeastern Colorado, and into northwestern Kansas, with watches extending down into North Texas. And we also have flood watches up for parts of western Nebraska, parts of South Dakota, and eastern Wyoming, and even into parts of southern Montana here. So there's a pretty busy round of severe weather going on across much of the Rockies and the Central Plains, and even parts of the western areas of the Southern Plains getting into it. There's likely to be a fairly extensive outbreak of severe weather there, and we'll take a look at the Storm Prediction Center's map for tonight, showing the large area of enhanced risk back into the Rockies and Plains, and where you have those watches up accordingly. We also have that slight risk of severe weather in the southeast in parts of Georgia and Alabama, inside an area of marginal risk for North Florida into South Carolina, and of course that is with Alberto. And we have a small area of marginal risk this evening up in parts of New York State and northern Pennsylvania. There's a small little cluster of thunderstorms that has developed late this afternoon. It looked to me like it was peaking in intensity, so this may go away in the next couple of hours and is not going to be of any major concern. But that severe weather outbreak, that possibility of a severe weather outbreak tonight is real. We're going to I'll bring up the full U.S. radar so we can see the action that's going on, not just with Alberto, but what's going on where we're expecting that risk of severe weather. And we do see some rather strong thunderstorms that are forming in northwestern Kansas and on up into central Nebraska, but it looks like those storms could be borderline severe now as of 6 o'clock as they show up on the radar in parts of northwest Kansas. And also we're seeing some showers and downpours in parts of Colorado, back up into Wyoming now. And then you also see the tropical moisture that is Alberto The actual signature of Alberto has kind of separated itself from the area of showers that's up to the north, but it really is all part of the rather large upper air circulation that's involved in all of this. This rain activity is not going to make it that much further to the north. It is going to come to a grinding halt. So for those of you from eastern Pennsylvania through southern New England, including New Jersey, New York City, Long Island, the Hudson Valley, and Connecticut, we're not going to see very much as far as that. We're going to see this rain here come up over the next 2 days. Much of this is going to wind up going more to the west and north than it is going toward the coast, at least through Wednesday. We may start to get some of that residual moisture here Thursday and Friday. But by that time, a lot of it would have been basically fanned out over such a large area. I don't think its impact is going to be too big a deal. Yeah, there might be some downpours, and yes, there might be some heavy rains to deal with in some heavier downpours. But I'm not looking here to have, any kind of widespread big rain in the Northeast. In the flood watch areas, it will probably be a bit of a different story. So I think what we'll do now is we're going to I'll bring up the models. We'll take a look at where they're going with all of this, and I will, in the meantime, at least we'll bring up the severe weather risk in the corner, so you can watch that. I'll put myself here at the bottom, and then we'll have the we'll bring up the GFS for you momentarily. I'll bring up the NAM first, I think, so we can take a look at where we're going with the overnight. And this is the late afternoon run of the NAM. It's probably, judging from what we see on the radar and what the NAM's presentation is, I think it's a bit underdone. There'll probably be more in terms of the overall radar profile. It looks like the way the NAM portrays it. I think there'll probably be more in reality. And going into tomorrow night and through the first part of Wednesday, I'm going to have to make this a little bigger because I'm having trouble seeing this. There we go. But you can see there's still going to be some residual showers and downpours. Looks like once we get into Wednesday, you start to get some diurnal effect where the showers get enhanced during the mid and late afternoon, die off a bit at night, and then fire up again as we move into Thursday and Friday. But there will be some showers, I think, in the east, and I think it's going to be a bit more than what the NAM is indicating. There's a lot of tropical moisture here, and you've got some energy in the upper atmosphere that would be supportive, I think, for a bigger outbreak. So here's the GFS's view tomorrow morning. The remnant circulation in central Alabama. You've got rain up from South Florida up into eastern North Carolina. But notice there's a big high in eastern Canada that is going to be building in for Tuesday night and Wednesday. So that's going to turn the flow more onshore, and it's going to push a wedge of dry air southwestward. So that's the main reason why we don't think this moisture is going to get up here until maybe as we get into Thursday. Then we'll start to see some showers around in my neck of the woods, and that may continue into Friday and even into Saturday, because the remnant of Alberto really kind of morphs into a remnant low, a non-tropical low, and gets involved with another weather front. There's another big high that's coming down from north central Canada. We're going to actually have a blocking signature in the upper atmosphere going forward for the next 7 or 8 days, and that is going to keep things rather volatile here in the Northeast, with the occasional day where it gets very warm. And for us, that day will be Tuesday, when we'll see temperatures up around 90 in some places. And then we're going to start switching into a couple of days or longer with an onshore flow. And you can see here, after we get into Saturday, that onshore flow develops again as a big high drops down from the north. So it looks like the month of June, at least, may start a bit on the cool side, particularly in areas that are subjected to the marine influence and the cold ocean temperatures. So along the immediate coast, we could see some pretty, temperature anomalies on the order of -5 to maybe -10 in terms of below normal. If you wind up with a day this time of year where temperatures are hard pressed to get out of the upper 50s and low 60s, that's a pretty sizable temperature departure from average. I'll go back a little bit and on the surface, so we can take a look now also at the outbreak of severe weather tonight in the plains, and you can see it here how the GFS portrays it with strong thunderstorms developing this evening. We're seeing evidence of that on the radar. Then they kind of die off, and then the area of risk shifts eastward tomorrow into central and eastern Kansas and into parts of Nebraska. So there's where you see the GFS producing some storms. There's an upper trough that's swinging around here, and that's going to be that's part of the reason why Alberto is lifting northward as a remnant low there, and then gradually that upper trough winds up moving to the east. Here it is on the upper air map, and there you have it. So there's your the closed upper low sitting over the Florida Panhandle. You can see the deep upper low that is in the back over into central Utah, and that energy kind of tries to come out eastward and eventually succeeds and picks up Alberto and then begins to kick it along to the northeast. So we're going to get into some rain for sure. Let's look at the rainfall amounts that we're forecasting here from the GFS's standpoint. And you got to be always careful with tropical systems because oftentimes the models do tend to be a bit conservative, and that local amounts could certainly be higher. So starting with by tomorrow morning, we've got an additional 2 to 4 inches of rain in that area down in southern Alabama and into parts of the Florida Panhandle. And then gradually, as we go into Thursday, you can see how the rain area spreads out. And you can also see, by the way, that wedge of dry air from the high to the north and the onshore flow. There's kind of a wall here. It's going to try and hold back the showers in the northeast. If you want to believe the GFS, you really don't get into the more important shower activity to until maybe Thursday night and Friday. But I would say that with the models generating 2 to 5 inches of rain from western Kentucky and Tennessee down through Alabama, and also through parts of central and south Florida, additional rains on top of what they've seen, and in eastern North Carolina, you probably can at least increase these amounts by 50%, or maybe even double them in some cases. So instead of 2 to 4, it might be more on the lines of say 4 to 6, with some local amounts up to 7 or 8 inches. I wouldn't at all be surprised if that winds up happening. So very, very interesting and busy weather scenario that we have this evening. Thankfully, Alberto, which really the odds of it developing, as we said earlier, were on the long side, to say the least. Thankfully, that we didn't really see this thing rev up too badly. It was fairly manageable overall. And now the next course of events will be how much rain falls in the Tennessee and Ohio Valley, and particularly in the southeast. You got to remember too, folks, that a lot of that area is saturated from rain over the last couple of weeks, and it's not going to take too much to bring about some serious flooding issues in the areas that we showed you that were under the flood watch. So I'm going to come back to the board at the moment, and it's as always good to see everybody here. I hope you took the time out on this Memorial Day, a few minutes to remember those who have sacrificed their lives so that we can live in the free nation that we do. It's not just about barbecues and going to the beach and etc. It's a very important day, and it's important that we honor it, commemorate it, and remember the sacrifice of those who went to battle and are still out there now today, away from their families. Okay, so the Maryland flood. I see a number of you have touched upon this, and I just want to mention something about that. The flooding that occurred in Ellicott City, I believe it is. there's when we see these sorts of things happen, and of course then you start to get the usual. It's climate change. It's any one of a number of different things. I want to just put these other points out there. One is the fact that much of Maryland, Virginia, in the D.C. Baltimore area has had a ton of rain in the last 2 weeks. So the flooding threshold was probably very low to begin with, in that the ground was absolutely saturated, so that it wasn't going to take very much to cause an issue. The other thing, which doesn't really get mentioned too often, but I think it's very important, is that in areas where you do have flooding, you do have to look at how has the topography changed over the last 50 or 100 years. How much building has there been? Is it overbuilt? Because oftentimes what happens in these instances is when as neighborhoods are being built, et cetera, they try to take into account what the impacts are going to be, and oftentimes they may not be front and center, and you wind up with perhaps flooding that's worse than what it might have been had there not been construction in one area versus another. These are all things that really are kind of beyond my scope. I mean, you have to sort of look at your own area. The arguments also hold when it comes to building along coastal areas, and that damage is far more extensive now than it used to be. You look at frequency of storms and so on. The dollar cost values, of course, have gone up, and especially with inflation. But don't forget, it's much more built up now than it used to be. Are they building in the West Coast? They built houses in places that have always been prone to fire risk. So you have to ask the question: should we be building in areas that are prone to fire risk? Just putting it out there. I'm not making any kind of judgment here. So you have to kind of take all of this into account. But no doubt that flood was incredible. Almost 10, 11 inches of rain falling in a couple of hours of time. And the river, apparently the city, from what I understand, I really didn't get a chance to read too much into it, but is between two rivers, and the Tiber, I believe, is one, and I forgot the name of the other, but the overflowing in one wound up, going into the other river, and it just became just an incredible flash flood. But, there's a whole lot of different factors. It's not just the incredible amount of rain that fell, and in no doubt that it was an incredible amount of rain. Okay, so the warnings have already expired. Okay, so that were issued in areas this morning have all expired. Let me just take a look. I don't know which areas you are referring to, Alex, because the warnings do change from advisory to advisory. They still have tropical storm warnings up for parts of the north coast of Florida, but they're going to come down. The inland, I just want to check because sometimes the coloring here is a little off. Yeah, they're for some of the inland counties that include Panama City and areas to the west, but those warnings are eventually going to come down once the storm moves inland. I don't know if you're referring to those warnings or the ones that were up overnight in areas to the west that extended down to Tampa, St. Pete. Yeah, those warnings are done, and they're not coming back. Right, Anthony. No, I did quantify what you said. Just back to 1851 with Abel. For that statistic about the fact that this is the second strongest that's been observed in the month of May, as far as the pressure is concerned. Definitely, David Schwartz, South Florida needs a dry spell after having a long dry spell alleviated by an incredible amount of rain, and now we're going to get there might be some more rain over the next couple of days. That tropical feeder, because of the very large amorphous circulation in the upper low, you're going to have a tropical feed of moisture that is going to continue to send moisture from the Caribbean across Cuba and across southern Florida and pipe it up northward, although it may be more confined to southern Florida and not necessarily spread over the entire state. I hate to say this because I don't want any severe weather, but Louisiana could use some rain to help with your dry spell. Yeah, it's hard to imagine because, I mean, having lived in New Orleans and knowing how it can rain there almost on cue every day, it's hard to imagine that you guys are in a dry spell, but it does happen from time to time. The storm taking the track further east is pretty much kept you out. The rain shield on the western edge of all of this was going to have a sharp cutoff, which indeed it did, and you know, you didn't get much rain. We'll see if we have opportunities for more rain as we go through the week and into next week with this weather pattern that's evolving. Heavy rain for you, Dark Knight, in Alabama, and you're going to get some more as this as Alberto finds its way very slowly northward, because it is going to be kind of inching along there. I'm just trying to get to everywhere. Where's a good place to get radars, watches, warnings, information for Canada and Mexico? Well, you know, I've looked at the European weather websites, which, you know, I don't, their government weather service websites, which don't really give a whole lot of information, certainly nowhere near as good as our National Weather Service websites are. Ours are just absolutely terrific, and they've done a very good job with it. I'll have to do a little research on that, but you know, my experience from what I've seen in Europe is they don't give you access to a whole lot of information, but maybe Canada's different. I'm going to just off camera. Let's see if I can bring up something. Okay, Canada weather. The Environment Canada weather information, which is weather.gc.ca. If you just Google Canada Weather Service, you'll get something. I just want to see what it looks like. Oh, they do have radars available here. Oh, I'm just trying to get close up. I can already tell you they aren't near, you know, they really don't look as good as ours do. They're a bit plain, but they are something. So that is a plus. So if you Google Canada Weather Service, you'll get Canada weather for all the provinces, and they do have some information there. I will dig a little further when I get an opportunity, and you know, just see, you know, give you my opinion as far as how useful it is. Let's see, I'm just want to make sure I got everybody on the board. Okay, good. I think I covered everybody's questions tonight. Thank you so much for being here. Going to call an end to this at the moment. We will be back tomorrow, regular time, I think 6 o'clock Eastern time, with our next live stream. And tonight, 9:15 p.m., the Joe Rayo, Joe Cioffi show, the Joe and Joe Weather show on Facebook, meteorologist Joe Cioffi or Joe Rayo Weather. And if you're not on Facebook, I will upload the show to my YouTube video library, and hopefully I'll be able to do that before 10 o'clock Eastern time. Otherwise, if I miss that window, it'll probably be closer to midnight. And just to remind everybody, if a good way to support this channel, if you shop on Amazon, you can use the link on the descriptor to this live stream or on the descriptor to the video. We're a participant in the Amazon Services Associates program. It's an affiliate advertising program. This way, which provides a means for channels like mine to earn fees. You link to Amazon, you get your stuff. Amazon throws me back some coin, and everybody's happy, and it doesn't cost you an extra dime. And I appreciate those of you who have used it. And you don't, by the way, you don't have to buy what's on the recommended list on the link. You can very simply use the search box, and whatever you're looking for, Amazon will throw me back some coin, and that's a good thing. Okay, have a great rest of your day, folks. Continue to enjoy your Memorial Day safely, and drive carefully if you're traveling from one place to another. We will see you hopefully at 9:15 on the Joe and Joe Weather Show on Facebook.